The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Michael Collins ran his mop across the glossy wooden floor of the Rockford Concert Hall. It was nearly midnight, and the building stood empty except for him and the occasional security guard making rounds. Michael liked the quiet. It gave him time to think while his hands went through the familiar motions of cleaning. At 42, Michael's face carried the gentle lines of someone who smiled often, despite everything. His dark hair was beginning to gray at the temples, and he wore the standard Navy uniform of the maintenance staff, with sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms strengthened by years of physical work. The name tag pinned to his chest was slightly faded from countless washings. "Almost done in here, Mr. Collins?" called a friendly voice. Michael looked up to see Tom, the night security guard, leaning against the doorway. Tom was in his 60s with a kind face and a habit of checking in on Michael during his shifts. "Just about," Michael replied, wringing out his mop one last time. "How's it going tonight?" "Quiet as always." "Say, isn't tomorrow a big day for Lily?" Michael's face brightened at the mention of his daughter. "Yeah, she's got her science fair. She's been working on her project for weeks, something about how music affects plant growth." "She's a smart kid." Tom nodded. "Takes after her dad, I bet." Michael just smiled. If only Tom knew how much Lily actually took after her mother. The same curious mind, the same determined spirit. Lisa had been gone for 3 years now, but Michael still saw her in everything their daughter did. "Better get home to her then. Don't stay too late," Tom said, continuing his rounds. After finishing his cleaning duties, Michael gathered his things from the small break room where the maintenance staff kept their belongings. He glanced at his watch. 12:35 a.m. The babysitter, Mrs. Patel from next door, would be waiting for him. She never complained about his late hours, understanding that a single dad had to take whatever work he could get to make ends meet. But instead of heading straight to the exit, Michael found himself walking back toward the main concert hall. He stood in the doorway, looking at the grand piano that sat center stage, bathed in a single spotlight that was always left on, the ghost light that theaters traditionally kept burning when the stage was empty. The piano seemed to call to him, as it did most nights. Michael checked his watch again. He could spare 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes before heading home. He walked slowly toward the stage, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Climbing the short set of stairs to the stage, he approached the piano with a reverence that had nothing to do with his job as a custodian. His fingers trailed lightly over the polished black surface before he settled onto the bench. For a moment, he just sat there, hands hovering over the keys. Then, with a small sigh, he began to play. The music that flowed from his fingers was nothing like what the regular patrons of Rockford Concert Hall might expect from the quiet maintenance man. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the empty space, the delicate notes rising to the ceiling like prayers. Michael's eyes closed as his hands moved from memory, his body swaying slightly with the music. What no one at the Rockford Concert Hall knew, what almost no one in Michael's current life knew, was that once upon a time, he had been considered one of the most promising piano students at Juilliard. Music had been his life, his future, his everything, until life had happened. As the piece reached its end, Michael allowed the final notes to linger in the air before opening his eyes. These stolen moments were all he permitted himself these days. 15 minutes of remembering who he used to be, before returning to who he was now, and who he was now was a father first. Everything else, including the musician he once was, had to come second. Michael didn't know that Tom sometimes stood in the shadows at the back of the hall, listening in amazement as the man everyone knew only as the hard-working janitor transformed into something else entirely when he sat at that piano. Tom had even recorded a few of these secret performances on his phone, never sharing them but watching them in wonder during slow shifts. "Daddy, you're home." 10-year-old Lily launched herself at Michael as he walked through the door of their small apartment just after 1 a.m. "Hey, Pumpkin," he said, catching her in a hug. "What are you still doing up?" "You've got a big day tomorrow." Lily's dark curls bounced as she pulled back to look at him. She had her mother's eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold that seemed to catch the light. "I was too excited to sleep. Mrs. Patel helped me put the finishing touches on my project." Mrs. Patel, a widow in her 60s who lived next door, smiled from where she sat on their worn but comfortable couch. She wouldn't rest until everything was perfect. A true scientist in the making. "Thank you for staying late," Michael said, reaching for his wallet. "Let me pay you for the extra hours." Mrs. Patel waved him off. No need, I enjoyed helping with the project. And Lily read me a story afterward. She's getting so good at reading. After seeing Mrs. Patel out, Michael turned to his daughter. Now, young lady, it's way past your bedtime. Can I show you my project first? Please, please, please. The excitement in her eyes made it impossible to refuse. 5 minutes, he agreed. Lily led him to the kitchen table where 3 small potted plants sat in a row. A carefully drawn chart was propped up behind them, showing their growth over the past few weeks. This one listened to classical music every day, Lily explained, pointing to the tallest plant. This one listened to rock music, and this one had no music at all. She looked up at him with serious eyes. The classical music plant grew the most. Do you think that's because plants like Mozart better than AC/DC? Michael chuckled. That's a good question. What do you think? I think maybe classical music has more patterns that plants understand somehow, she said thoughtfully. Or maybe they just don't like guitars. Well, your experiment looks very scientific to me, Michael said, feeling a swell of pride. Mrs. Henderson is going to be impressed. Do you think Mom would like it? Lily asked quietly. The question caught Michael off guard, as mentions of Lisa often did. She'd love it, he said, pulling Lily close. She always said you had a scientist's brain, always asking why and how. Lily nodded, satisfied. That's what I thought. Now, bed, Michael said firmly. You need your sleep if you're going to explain all this to your class tomorrow. After tucking Lily in and reading 1 chapter of the book they were working through together, Michael finally collapsed onto his own bed. Exhaustion pulled at him, but his mind kept returning to the piano at the concert hall and the brief moment of connection he'd felt with his old self. It had been over 10 years since he'd performed publicly. 10 years since he and Lisa had decided that with a baby on the way, they needed more stability than a struggling pianist could provide. He'd taken the job at the concert hall 5 years ago, after Lisa's medical bills had drained their savings and her illness had taken her from them. There was bitter irony in the fact that he now spent his nights cleaning the same spaces where he had once dreamed of performing. But bitterness wasn't a luxury Michael allowed himself, not when Lily needed him to be strong. His alarm was set for 6 a.m., just enough time to get Lily ready for school and drop her off before catching a few hours of sleep himself. Then he'd pick her up after school, take her to her piano lesson, because despite everything, music was still important in their home, make dinner, help with homework, and head back to work by 8 p.m. It wasn't the life he'd imagined for himself all those years ago at Juilliard. But when he thought about Lily's face lighting up as she showed him her science project, or the way she still practiced piano every day without complaint, he couldn't bring himself to regret the path his life had taken. As sleep finally claimed him, Michael's last thoughts were not of the concert hall or the music he'd played there tonight. They were of tomorrow's science fair, and whether he had enough time to stop by the store in the morning to buy flowers for Lily, a small celebration for his little scientist, regardless of whether she won any awards. In his dreams, Michael sometimes still performed on grand stages to thunderous applause. But his waking dreams were simpler now. A good education for Lily, a more comfortable home someday, maybe even piano lessons with a better teacher than he could currently afford. What Michael couldn't know, as he drifted off to sleep that night, was that in just a few days' time, an unexpected opportunity would arise that would change everything, starting with an empty stage that needed polishing, and ending with a performance that no one at the Rockford Concert Hall would ever forget. The science fair had gone better than either Michael or Lily could have hoped. Her project on music and plant growth had earned her not only a blue ribbon, but also special recognition from the principal. Michael had managed to take photos between yawns, having worked the night before, but his tiredness melted away when he saw Lily's face light up as she accepted her award. Do you think I could be a scientist someday? Lily asked as they walked home, her ribbon pinned proudly to her jacket and her project carried carefully in Michael's arms. You can be anything you want, Michael said, meaning it. Your mom and I always believed that. Even a scientist who plays piano? Lily grinned up at him. Michael laughed. Especially that kind. Lily had been taking piano lessons for 3 years now, though the best Michael could afford was weekly sessions with Mr. Grayson, a retired music teacher who charged less than the fancy music schools downtown. Michael supplemented the lessons himself, teaching Lily whenever they had free time together. Those were his favorite moments, sitting beside his daughter, on the bench of the second-hand upright piano they'd bought from a church that was upgrading their equipment. The piano wasn't much to look at, with its scratched wood and slightly yellowed keys, but it had a warm, rich tone that reminded Michael of the first piano he'd ever played as a child. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Michael got ready for work. Thursday nights were busy at the concert hall. There was a chamber music series that ran weekly, which meant more cleanup afterward. He kissed Lily's forehead as she slept and thanked Mrs. Patel for watching her. She couldn't stop talking about her blue ribbon, Mrs. Patel said with a smile. "You should be proud." "I am," Michael said, and the simple words couldn't begin to contain the depth of what he felt for his daughter. The concert hall was quiet when Michael arrived, the evening's chamber music performance having ended an hour before. The other maintenance workers were already at work, Carlos sweeping the lobby, Denise cleaning the bathrooms, and Robert taking out the trash. Michael headed straight for the main hall, where rows of seats needed to be wiped down and the stage prepared for tomorrow's rehearsal. "Hey, Collins," called Robert as they passed in the hallway. "Heard your kid did good at some science thing today." "News travels fast," Michael said with a smile. "Mrs. Patel told my wife when she saw her at the grocery store," Robert explained. "Small world, huh?" Michael nodded, touched that his neighbors took such an interest in Lily's achievements. This was why, despite the long hours and modest pay, he stayed in their small apartment in this close-knit neighborhood. Lily had a community here. People who looked out for her, celebrated her victories, helped pick her up when she fell. The main hall was empty when Michael entered, the ghost light casting long shadows across the stage. He set to work, cleaning methodically as his mind wandered. The chamber group that had performed tonight was a piano quartet: piano, violin, viola, and cello. Michael had caught a few minutes of their rehearsal earlier in the day when he'd come in to fix a leaky faucet in one of the dressing rooms. They had been playing Brahms, and the pianist had a light touch that Michael admired. As he worked his way toward the stage, Michael found himself humming the melody from the Brahms piece. Without realizing it, his fingers began to move at his sides, playing invisible keys as he remembered the notes. When he finally reached the stage and began to clean it, the grand piano stood just a few feet away, tempting him as always. Usually, Michael waited until he had finished all his cleaning duties before allowing himself his 15 minutes at the piano. But tonight, with the Brahms still echoing in his head, he found himself drawn to the instrument sooner than usual. He glanced at his watch. He was ahead of schedule, thanks to the relatively small crowd that had attended tonight's performance. Surely he could spare a few minutes now and still finish everything on time. Michael set down his cleaning supplies and approached the piano. The bench was still warm from the performer who had sat there hours earlier. Michael settled onto it, adjusting its height slightly. He was taller than the chamber group's pianist had been. For a moment, he simply sat with his hands resting lightly on the keys, not pressing down, just feeling the cool ivory beneath his fingertips. Then slowly he began to play the Brahms piano quartet in G minor that he had heard earlier. He played the piano part from memory, filling in the string parts where he could, improvising where his memory failed him. What Michael didn't know was that Tom wasn't the only one who sometimes listened to his late-night performances. Irene Bell, the concert hall's artistic director, had forgotten her reading glasses after attending the chamber music performance, and had returned to look for them. She was walking down the hallway toward the main hall when she heard the piano. Irene paused, confused. The musicians had all left hours ago. Who could be playing? And playing Brahms, the same piece from tonight's concert, with such skill? She quietly opened the door to the main hall and slipped inside. In the dim light, she could make out a figure at the piano, someone in the navy uniform of the maintenance staff. Irene stood frozen in the back of the hall, listening as this unexpected pianist played with a sensitivity and depth that surpassed even the professional who had performed earlier. When Michael finished the movement, the final chord hanging in the air, Irene couldn't help herself. She applauded. Michael jumped up from the bench as if he'd been caught stealing. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. I shouldn't have." "Please," Irene said, walking down the aisle toward the stage. "Don't apologize. That was extraordinary." Michael recognized her now, Ms. Bell, the artistic director. He'd seen her hurrying through the halls many times, always busy, always surrounded by musicians or board members. He'd cleaned her office countless times but had never actually spoken to her. I should get back to work, he said, reaching for his cleaning supplies. Wait, Irene said. She climbed the steps to the stage and approached him. You're Michael Collins, aren't you? You've worked here for how long? 5 years, Michael said, surprised she knew his name. And in those 5 years you never thought to mention that you play like that? Irene asked, gesturing to the piano. Michael shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. It never came up. Never came up. Irene repeated incredulously. You're working in a concert hall. You're surrounded by musicians every day, and you play like... She shook her head, seemingly at a loss for words. Where did you study? Michael hesitated. It had been so long since he'd talked about that part of his life. Juilliard, he finally said. But I didn't finish. Irene's eyebrows shot up. Juilliard, she echoed. And now you're cleaning our halls instead of performing on our stage? The question stung, though Michael knew she probably didn't mean it to. Life happens, he said simply. I needed something more stable. I have a daughter. Irene's expression softened. I didn't mean to pry. It's just, well, it's not every day I discover that one of our maintenance staff is a world-class pianist. I'm not world-class, Michael said quickly. I was promising once, but that was a long time ago. I'm out of practice. That didn't sound out of practice to me, Irene countered. She studied him for a moment. Would you play something else, please? Michael glanced at his watch again. He still had time before he needed to finish his rounds. And there was something about the genuine interest in Irene's eyes that made it hard to refuse. One more piece, he agreed, sitting back down at the piano. He chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece he had played for Lisa when they were dating, a piece he still played sometimes when Lily was having trouble falling asleep. His fingers found the delicate opening notes, and soon he was lost in the music again, the concert hall and Irene and his job all fading into the background. When he finished, Irene was silent for a long moment. Then she said, We have a benefit concert coming up next month. Our guest pianist is Gregory Chen. Do you know his work? Michael nodded. Everyone in the classical music world knew Gregory Chen, one of the most celebrated pianists of his generation. Would you be interested in playing for him? Irene asked. Not in the concert, she added quickly when she saw Michael's alarmed expression. Just a private audition, I suppose you could call it. He's always looking for new talent to mentor. Michael's heart raced at the idea. Gregory Chen was a legend, and the chance to play for him, to be heard by him, was something most pianists would give anything for. But then reality set in. I appreciate the offer, he said, but I don't think that's possible. I have my daughter to think about, my job. The audition would be here after one of his rehearsals, Irene said. You're already here for work. And it would only take an hour at most. Put that way, it seemed almost possible, but Michael was still hesitant. I haven't performed for anyone who matters in over a decade, he said. I wouldn't want to waste Mr. Chen's time. Irene smiled. After what I just heard, that's the last thing I'm worried about. She pulled a business card from her pocket and held it out to him. Think about it. Call me if you change your mind. Michael took the card, tucking it into his pocket. I should really get back to work now. Of course, Irene said, stepping back. And Michael? Thank you for the music. It was beautiful. After she left, Michael stood on the stage for a long moment, the weight of what had just happened settling over him. Then he picked up his cleaning supplies and got back to work, pushing thoughts of Gregory Chen and auditions to the back of his mind. But when he got home that night and looked in on sleeping Lily, her blue ribbon from the science fair proudly displayed on her bedside table, he found himself wondering what she would say if she knew about Irene's offer. Lily was always telling him he should play for people, that it wasn't fair he was so good and nobody knew it. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to consider letting the world, or at least Gregory Chen, hear him play again. 2 weeks had passed since Irene Bell had caught Michael playing the piano, and he still hadn't called the number on her card. Every night he'd take the small rectangle of heavy cardstock from his wallet, turn it over in his hands, and then put it away again without dialing. What was he thinking? He was a janitor now, not a concert pianist. That life was behind him. Dad, can you help me with this part? Lily called from the living room where she was practicing piano. It was Saturday morning, their time for lessons before Michael had to sleep for a few hours and then head to work. Michael joined her on the bench. Which part is giving you trouble? This section here. Lily pointed to a passage in the Mozart sonatina she was learning. My fingers get tangled up. That's because you're rushing, Michael said gently. Let me show you. He played the passage slowly, emphasizing the fingering. See? You need to prepare your hand position before you play these notes. Think ahead. Lily nodded, watching his hands intently. She tried again, this time more successfully. That's it, Michael said, pride swelling in his chest. You've got it. Lily beamed at him, then looked thoughtful. Dad, why don't you ever play in concerts? Mr. Grayson says you're better than most of the pianists he knows. Michael was taken aback. You and Mr. Grayson talk about my playing? Sometimes, Lily admitted. When you're late picking me up from lessons. He heard me playing something you taught me and asked where I learned it. I told him you taught me, and then he made me show him, and then he asked if you'd ever perform professionally. And what did you tell him? Michael asked, curious. I said I didn't know, Lily replied. Have you? Michael sighed. He rarely talked about his past with Lily, not wanting to burden her with what felt like ancient history. But she was old enough now to understand some of it. I used to, he said, before you were born. I studied at a music school in New York and performed in a few concerts. But then I met your mom, and we had you, and we needed something more steady than what music could provide. Do you miss it? Lily asked, her eyes serious. Michael thought about his nightly sessions at the concert hall piano, about the way playing made him feel alive in a way nothing else did. Sometimes, he admitted, but I have you and that's worth everything. Lily seemed to consider this. I think you should play for people again, she said finally. You make the most beautiful music in the world. Michael laughed and ruffled her hair. I think you might be a bit biased. Nope, Lily said confidently. Mr. Grayson says so too, and he's a professional. A retired professional, Michael corrected her with a smile. Now let's get back to this Mozart. But Lily's words stayed with him as they continued the lesson and later as he tried to sleep before his shift. The memory of Irene Bell's offer lingered too, to play for Gregory Chen, one of the most respected pianists alive today. When Michael arrived at work that evening, there was a buzz of activity unusual for a Saturday night. The concert hall's annual gala fundraiser was just a week away, and preparations were in full swing. Michael had to navigate around workers setting up decorations in the lobby as he made his way to the maintenance office to clock in. There you are. Collins, said his supervisor, Alan. I was about to call you. We've got a situation. What kind of situation? Michael asked, immediately concerned. In his 5 years at the concert hall, he'd handled everything from broken pipes to raccoons in the ceiling. The piano on the main stage, Alan said. Something's wrong with it. The piano tuner's been working on it all day, but he says there's something mechanical that needs fixing. They've called in a specialist, but he won't be here until tomorrow afternoon. And that's a problem because, Michael prompted. Because the pianist for the gala is doing a preliminary sound check in an hour, Alan explained. Some hotshot who insisted on trying out the acoustics before the actual rehearsals next week. Irene is having kittens about it. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. The pianist. Is it Gregory Chen? Alan snapped his fingers. That's the one. You know about him? Everyone in classical music knows Gregory Chen, Michael said automatically. Then making a split-second decision. Let me take a look at the piano. Alan raised his eyebrows. You know about pianos too? A little, Michael said, already heading toward the door. I'll see what I can do. The main hall was empty except for a harried-looking Irene Bell and an older man bent over the grand piano, muttering to himself. Irene looked up as Michael entered, recognition flashing across her face. Michael, she said, sounding surprised. What are you doing here? Alan told me about the piano, Michael explained. I thought I might be able to help. The older man straightened up from the piano. You know something about pianos, son? I played for many years, Michael said, approaching the instrument. And I did some work with a piano technician in college to help pay tuition. The man, who introduced himself as Frank, the hall's regular piano tuner, looked skeptical but stepped aside. Be my guest. One of the keys is sticking. A flat above middle C. I've tuned it correctly, but something's catching in the action. Michael nodded and sat down at the piano. He played a few notes, then the problematic A-flat. Sure enough, the key didn't return properly after being pressed. He played a few more notes around it, trying to identify the issue. Do you have a flashlight? He asked Frank. The tuner handed him a small penlight. Michael removed the music desk from the piano to better see inside, then shone the light on the mechanism for the A-flat key. After a moment, he spotted the problem. "There's something caught in the action," he said, reaching in carefully. With nimble fingers, he extracted a small paper clip that had somehow fallen into the piano. This was blocking the hammer from returning properly. He tested the key again. This time, it sprang back as it should. Frank leaned in to look, then shook his head in amazement. "Well, I'll be. Good eye, son." Irene was staring at Michael with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Is there anything you can't do with a piano?" she asked. Michael felt his cheeks warm. "Plenty," he said. "But finding a paperclip isn't one of them." "You just saved us from a very uncomfortable situation with Mr. Chen," Irene said. "Thank you." "Happy to help," Michael replied, standing up from the bench. "I should get back to my regular duties now." "Actually," Irene said, "since you're here, I was wondering if you'd given any more thought to my offer." "About playing for Mr. Chen," Michael hesitated. Lily's words from that morning echoed in his mind. "I think you should play for people again." "I don't know," he said honestly. "It's been a long time since I performed for anyone who matters." "You performed for me," Irene pointed out. "And I matter in this industry." Michael couldn't help but smile at that. "You caught me off guard that night. It's different when I'm prepared to be judged." Irene's expression softened. "It wouldn't be about judgment, Michael. It would be about music, pure and simple." Before Michael could respond, the doors at the back of the hall opened and a small group of people entered. In the center was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and an imperious bearing that was recognizable even from a distance. Gregory Chen. "Irene, my dear," he called as he approached. "Is everything ready? I have only an hour before my dinner engagement." "Yes, Mr. Chen, we're all set," Irene said, stepping forward to greet him. "The piano was having a minor issue, but it's been resolved." Chen nodded curtly, his eyes already on the piano. He barely seemed to notice Michael and Frank standing nearby. "I'll leave you to it then," Michael said quietly to Irene. "Good luck with the sound check." He turned to go, but Irene caught his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Stay for a few minutes. Listen to him play. It might inspire you." Against his better judgment, Michael nodded and retreated to the shadows at the side of the stage. Frank packed up his tools and left, but Michael lingered, watching as Gregory Chen settled at the piano with the ease of someone who had spent most of his life there. Without any preamble, Chen began to play, a Chopin etude, fast and technically challenging. His fingers flew over the keys with precision, each note crisp and perfectly placed. It was a masterful performance, no doubt about it. But as Michael listened, he felt something was missing. There was technique in abundance, but where was the heart? Chen finished the piece and immediately began another without pause. This time, the Brahms that Michael had been playing when Irene discovered him. Again, the performance was technically flawless. But where Michael had leaned into the emotional depths of the piece, Chen skimmed over the surface, showcasing his virtuosity without revealing anything of himself. "What do you think?" Irene had appeared beside Michael in the shadows. "He's brilliant," Michael said truthfully. "His technique is impeccable." "But," Irene prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation in his voice. Michael hesitated, unwilling to criticize someone of Chen's stature. "It's not my place to comment. I'm asking for your opinion as a musician," Irene pressed. "Not as a member of our maintenance staff." Michael sighed. "He plays every note perfectly. But music isn't just about perfect notes." Irene nodded slowly. "That's what I've always thought about his playing. Technically brilliant, but sometimes cold." She turned to face Michael directly. "That's why I want him to hear you play. You have what he lacks. Heart, soul, whatever you want to call it. And he has what you might benefit from. Discipline, technique honed over decades of professional playing." Michael watched as Chen moved on to a third piece, Rachmaninoff now, the notes cascading like water. "You really think he'd have any interest in hearing me play?" "I know he would," Irene said confidently. "Gregory is always looking for fresh perspectives, even at his age. Especially at his age. He's aware that younger pianists sometimes find his playing too academic." "I'm hardly younger," Michael pointed out. "I'm 42. "That's 20 years younger than Gregory," Irene said with a smile. "In the classical music world, you're practically a baby." Michael laughed softly at that. Then, making a decision that surprised even himself, he said, "All right, If he's willing, I'm willing. Irene's face lit up. Really, you'll do it? Not tonight, Michael clarified. I need time to prepare, to practice properly. And I need to make arrangements for Lily. Of course, Irene said quickly. How about next Friday after the gala? Gregory will still be in town, and the pressure of the performance will be off. It would be just him, you, me, and the piano. Friday was Michael's night off. He could ask Mrs. Patel to watch Lily for a few hours. Friday would work, he agreed. Wonderful. Irene squeezed his arm. I won't tell him anything about you in advance. I want him to be completely surprised. As Gregory Chen continued to play, unaware of the conversation happening in the shadows, Michael felt a mixture of excitement and terror. After all these years, he was going to play for someone who could truly assess his abilities. Someone who could confirm whether the path not taken might have led somewhere worth going. But more importantly, he was doing this for Lily, to show her that it was never too late to revisit old dreams, to take chances, to be brave. Whether Gregory Chen was impressed or not, Michael knew his daughter would be proud of him for trying. The week leading up to the gala flew by in a blur of activity. Michael continued his regular shifts at the concert hall, but now there was an electric undercurrent to his work, a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. He found himself watching Gregory Chen during rehearsals, studying the famous pianist's technique from a distance as he polished brass fixtures or swept the floors. At home, Michael dusted off his old sheet music, pages yellowed with age and marked with notes from his Juilliard days. After Lily went to bed, he would practice silently on their upright piano, his fingers barely pressing the keys to avoid making sound. It wasn't ideal, but it helped him remember the pieces he wanted to play for Chen. You seem different, Dad, Lily observed on Thursday evening as they ate dinner. Like you're thinking about something important. Michael looked up from his spaghetti, surprised by his daughter's perceptiveness. Do I? Lily nodded, twirling pasta around her fork. You've been humming a lot, and sometimes your fingers tap on the table like you're playing piano. Michael hadn't realized he'd been doing that. Well, he said slowly, I am thinking about something important. I'm going to play the piano for someone tomorrow night. Really? Lily's eyes widened. Like a concert? Not exactly, Michael explained. More like an audition. Remember I told you about when I used to perform? The man I'm playing for is a famous pianist, one of the best in the world. Are you nervous? Lily asked. Michael considered the question. Yes, he admitted. Very nervous. I get nervous before my piano recitals too, Lily said seriously. Mr. Grayson says it's because we care about doing a good job. Mr. Grayson is right, Michael said with a smile. Can I come watch you play? Lily asked hopefully. Michael shook his head. Not this time, Pumpkin. Mrs. Patel will stay with you while I'm gone. But if it goes well... He hesitated, not wanting to make promises he couldn't keep. If it goes well, maybe there will be other opportunities. I bet you'll play better than the famous pianist, Lily said confidently. Michael laughed. That's not really the point. It's not a competition. Still, Lily insisted, you'll be the best. The next evening, Michael stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his shirt. It was the nicest one he owned, a dark blue button-down that Lisa had bought him for their last anniversary before she got sick. He'd paired it with his only decent pair of slacks and the leather shoes he kept for special occasions. It wasn't concert attire by any means, but it was the best he could do. He hadn't owned a suit since he'd sold his last one years ago to help pay for Lisa's medications. You look handsome. Dad, Lily said from the doorway. Michael turned to find his daughter watching him, already in her pajamas, her curly hair damp from her bath. Thank you, sweetheart, he said, kneeling down to her level. Now you be good for Mrs. Patel, okay? I should be back by 10. I will, Lily promised. She threw her arms around his neck. Good luck. Play the pretty music that makes people cry. Michael hugged her tightly. I'll try. Mrs. Patel arrived a few minutes later, shooing Michael out the door when he started giving her detailed instructions about Lily's bedtime routine. We'll be fine, she assured him. This isn't our first rodeo. The concert hall was quiet when Michael arrived. The gala had ended hours ago, the wealthy patrons and their checkbooks long gone. A security guard nodded to him at the entrance, having been told to expect him. They're waiting for you in the main hall, the guard said. Michael's heart pounded as he walked the familiar hallways. This time not as a janitor, but as a musician. He paused outside the doors to the main hall, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Then he pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The hall was dimly lit, with just the stage lights and a few wall sconces providing illumination. Irene Bell stood near the piano, deep in conversation with Gregory Chen. They both looked up as Michael approached. "Ah, here he is," Irene said, smiling warmly. "Mr. Chen, this is Michael Collins, the pianist I told you about." Chen's eyes flicked over Michael, taking in his ordinary clothes and unassuming appearance. "You work here as a janitor?" he asked without preamble. "I'm on the maintenance staff, yes," Michael replied, refusing to be intimidated. "And you studied at—" "Juilliard," Michael said. "Though I didn't finish my degree." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Irene tells me you're quite talented. She's not easily impressed, so I'm curious." Irene gestured toward the piano. "Why don't we let Michael show you himself?" Michael approached the grand piano, the same one he cleaned every night, the same one he played in secret when no one was listening. Except this time someone very important was listening. He sat down at the bench, adjusting its height and distance from the keys. His hands were steady as he placed them in his lap, gathering his thoughts. "What will you play for us?" Chen asked, settling into a seat in the front row. Michael had thought carefully about his selection. He wanted something that would showcase his technical skills but also his emotional depth, something that spoke to who he was as a musician and as a person. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. "First movement," he said. "I'll adapt the orchestral parts for piano." Chen's eyebrows rose higher. It was an ambitious choice, one of the most beloved but challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. "Whenever you're ready," Irene said, taking a seat next to Chen. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of Lily's words, "Play the pretty music that makes people cry." Then he began. The famous opening chords resonated through the hall, each one growing in intensity. Michael felt the familiar sensation of the world falling away as he played, until there was nothing but himself in the music. His fingers remembered what his mind had forgotten: the hours of practice, the guidance of his teachers, the joy of surrendering completely to the music. He played with technical precision but also with raw emotion, thinking of all that had brought him to this moment. The dreams deferred, the love found and lost with Lisa, the precious gift that was Lily, the humble work that had kept them afloat all these years. All of it poured through his fingers into the music. When he reached the end of the movement, Michael was barely aware of the tears on his face. The final notes hung in the air for a long moment before fading to silence. Neither Irene nor Chen spoke immediately. Michael wiped his cheeks quickly and turned to face them, bracing himself for criticism. Chen's expression was unreadable. "How long has it been since you performed publicly?" he asked. 12 years, Michael answered. "And how often do you practice?" Michael hesitated. 15 minutes most nights here at the hall after my shift. And sometimes at home with my daughter. She's learning piano too. Chen exchanged a glance with Irene. "Would you play something else? Something from the Baroque period, perhaps?" Michael nodded and turned back to the piano. He chose Bach's Prelude in C minor from the Well-Tempered Clavier, a piece that required a completely different approach than the Rachmaninoff. More restraint, more precision, less overt emotion. Again, he lost himself in the music, finding the mathematical beauty in Bach's intricate patterns. When he finished, he looked to Chen for a response. The famous pianist was leaning forward in his seat, his elbows on his knees, his chin resting on his steepled fingers. "One more," he said. "Something of your choice." Michael thought for a moment, then decided to take a risk. "I'd like to play something I composed," he said, "for my late wife." Without waiting for a response, he began to play a piece he had written during the darkest days after Lisa's death, a melody that spoke of love and loss and the bittersweet beauty of memories. It was the most personal thing he could share, a piece of his heart translated into music. When the last note faded, Michael sat motionless at the piano. The silence in the hall was profound. Finally, Chen spoke. "You have a remarkable gift," he said quietly. "Raw in places, certainly. Your technique could use refinement after so many years away from serious study. But your musicality," he shook his head, "that cannot be taught." "Thank you," Michael said, not knowing what else to say. Chen stood and approached the piano. "I understand you have a daughter," he said. "And responsibilities." "Yes," Michael confirmed. "Lily is 10, Chen nodded thoughtfully. I'm starting a new program at the conservatory. Master classes for pianists who came to music later in life or who left and wish to return. Weekend sessions primarily. I would like you to be part of it." Michael stared at him, not sure he had heard correctly. "You want me to take classes?" "No," Chen said with a hint of impatience. "I want you to teach. Under my guidance, of course. Your story and your playing would be inspirational to many, and in return you would receive private instruction from me to refine your own skills." Michael's mind raced. Teaching at the conservatory, studying with Gregory Chen, it was beyond anything he could have imagined when he walked into the hall tonight. "The position includes a stipend," Chen continued. "Not enough to live on, certainly, but enough to supplement your income. Perhaps enough that you wouldn't need to work quite so many hours here." I don't know what to say," Michael stammered. "Say yes," Irene encouraged from her seat. "It's an incredible opportunity, Michael." "I need to think about how it would affect Lily," Michael said. "Her schedule, her needs." Chen nodded, respecting his priorities. "Of course. Discuss it with your daughter, but do not take too long to decide. The program begins in 3 weeks." As Michael left the concert hall that night, his mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. For the first time in years, he was allowing himself to imagine a different future, one where music was once again at the center of his life, one where he could share his gift with others and continue to grow as an artist. But the most exciting thought was what he would tell Lily, how her face would light up when she heard that her father, her ordinary, everyday father who fixed leaky faucets and helped with homework and made slightly burned pancakes on Sunday mornings, had impressed one of the greatest pianists in the world. As he walked home through the quiet streets, Michael found himself humming the piece he had composed for Lisa. Somehow, he felt she was walking beside him tonight, sharing in this unexpected turn in his path. "You were right," he whispered to the night air. "Dreams don't have expiration dates." 3 months had passed since Michael's audition for Gregory Chen. Spring had given way to summer, and the early morning sunshine streamed through the windows of their new apartment as Michael packed Lily's lunch for day camp. "Don't forget I have my recital tonight," Lily reminded him, her mouth full of cereal. "How could I forget?" Michael smiled, tucking a handwritten note into her lunchbox. "I've been hearing you practice that Mozart for weeks now." Their lives had transformed dramatically since that night at the concert hall. Michael had accepted Chen's offer to teach weekend master classes at the conservatory, and the renowned pianist had kept his word about providing private instruction. Twice a week, Michael worked with Chen, rediscovering the technical precision he had once possessed while maintaining the emotional depth that made his playing unique. The stipend from the conservatory, combined with Michael's reduced hours at the concert hall, had allowed them to move from their tiny apartment to a slightly larger one closer to Lily's school. The building wasn't fancy, but it had a small community garden where Lily had planted tomatoes and zinnias. And, most importantly, it had enough space for a proper piano. The piano had been a gift from Irene Bell and the board of the concert hall, delivered the day after Michael had given his notice that he would be cutting back his maintenance hours. It wasn't brand new, but it was a significant upgrade from their old upright. A baby grand with a warm, rich tone that filled their new living room perfectly. "Mr. Chen is coming to my recital, right?" Lily asked, rinsing her cereal bowl in the sink. "He said he would," Michael confirmed. "And he doesn't make promises lightly." The relationship between Chen and the Collins family had evolved in unexpected ways. The stern, demanding teacher had revealed a softer side when it came to Lily. He had attended her spring piano recital and afterward had offered to give her occasional lessons to ensure she doesn't develop bad habits. What had started as monthly sessions had quickly become weekly ones, with Chen refusing to accept payment. "He sees himself in you," Irene had explained to Michael one day. "Not just your talent, but your dedication to your daughter. His own father sacrificed everything to give him piano lessons when he was a boy in Shanghai. It's a debt he's paying forward." "We need to leave in 5 minutes," Michael called to Lily, who had disappeared into her room to finish getting ready for camp. "Don't forget your swimsuit today." Their new morning routine was still taking some getting used to. Instead of sleeping during the day and working nights, Michael now worked at the concert hall only 3 evenings a week. The rest of his time was split between teaching at the conservatory and practicing for his own performances. because that was the most stunning development of all. Michael Collins was performing again. It had started small, playing at a donor event for the conservatory, then at a chamber music series in a local church. Word had spread quickly in the city's musical circles about the janitor pianist who had impressed Gregory Chen, and soon Michael was receiving invitations to play at various venues around town. His first major performance had been, just 2 weeks ago, a solo recital at the very concert hall where he had once mopped the floors. The program had included works by Bach, Chopin, and Rachmaninoff, ending with the piece he had composed for Lisa. The hall had been nearly full, with many of his former maintenance colleagues sitting in complimentary seats in the front row, cheering him on. Lily emerged from her room with her backpack and a canvas bag containing her swim things. "Ready?" she announced. As they walked to the bus stop, Lily skipping ahead and then waiting for Michael to catch up, he marveled at how well she had adapted to the changes in their lives. She took pride in her father's musical career, but she never acted as though it made him, or by extension her, special or important. To Lily, he was still just Dad, the one who made her lunch and helped with her homework and comforted her when she had bad dreams. "There's the bus," Lily said, pointing down the street. She gave Michael a quick hug. "See you at my recital." "Don't be late." "Wouldn't dream of it," Michael assured her, watching as she boarded the bus with a group of other children heading to the community center's summer program. With Lily safely on her way, Michael returned to their apartment and settled at the piano. He had 2 hours to practice before his meeting with Chen. They were working on a Mozart piano concerto that Michael would be performing with the city's chamber orchestra in the fall, his first time playing with an orchestra since his Juilliard days. As his fingers moved over the keys, Michael reflected on how much had changed in just 3 months. There were still challenges, of course. Balancing his rediscovered musical career with single parenthood wasn't easy. There were nights when he returned home exhausted from performing, only to find that Lily needed help with a school project due the next day. There were mornings when she woke up sick, and he had to cancel lessons or rehearsals to care for her. But they were making it work, one day at a time, and if his career progression was slower than it might have been for someone without a child to raise, Michael didn't mind. Lily would always come first. The hours passed quickly as Michael lost himself in Mozart's intricate passages. He was still working on a particularly challenging section when his phone buzzed with a text message from Chen. "Don't forget to bring the Bach scores to our session today." Michael glanced at the clock and realized he was running late. He quickly gathered his music and headed out, walking the 6 blocks to Chen's studio at the conservatory. "You're continuing to make progress," Chen said at the end of their 2-hour session, making a notation in the margin of Michael's score. "But you're still rushing the cadenza. It needs room to breathe." "I'll work on it," Michael promised, tucking the score into his bag. Chen studied him for a moment. "The orchestra director called me yesterday. He's very pleased with how the rehearsals are going." "He's been incredibly supportive," Michael agreed. "The whole orchestra has." "They recognize genuine talent," Chen said matter-of-factly. He was never effusive with praise, which made his next words all the more meaningful. "As do I. You've come further in 3 months than most of my students do in 3 years." "I had a good foundation," Michael said modestly. "And an excellent teacher." Chen waved away the compliment. "We'll continue with the Mozart next week and—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've been meaning to ask you something." "What is it?" Michael prompted when Chen didn't continue. "Your composition, the piece you wrote for your wife. Have you written others?" Michael nodded slowly. "A few. Mostly just for myself or for Lily." "Would you bring them to our next session?" "I'd like to see them." "Of course," Michael agreed, surprised and touched by the request. "Good. And I'll see you and Lily tonight at her recital." As Michael left the conservatory, he realized he had just enough time to stop by the concert hall before picking Lily up from camp. He had promised to help Carlos, his former maintenance colleague, with a stubborn leak in one of the backstage bathrooms. The concert hall looked different to him now that he wasn't seeing it through the eyes of a janitor. He noticed details he had overlooked before, the intricate moldings on the ceiling, the way the afternoon light filtered through the lobby's stained glass windows, the perfect acoustics of the main hall that made even footsteps sound musical. "There he is," Carlos called as Michael entered through the stage door. "Our celebrity plumber." Michael laughed and gave his friend a hug. Just a guy who knows his way around a wrench. Show me this leak you can't fix. They spent the next hour working on the stubborn pipe, chatting easily about their families and the upcoming baseball game they were planning to attend with Robert and some of the other maintenance staff. Despite his changing circumstances, Michael had maintained these friendships, refusing to act as though his new role in the music world somehow made him superior to the men and women he had worked alongside for years. "You're still coming to dinner on Sunday, right?" Carlos asked as they finished up. "Rosa's making her famous enchiladas." "Wouldn't miss it," Michael assured him. "Lily's been talking about it all week." After leaving the concert hall, Michael hurried to pick Lily up from camp. She was waiting at the entrance, deep in conversation with her music teacher from school, who had been volunteering with the summer program. "Mr. Collins," the teacher greeted him. "I was just telling Lily how much I'm looking forward to her recital tonight. She's been practicing during our music hour at camp." "She's been practicing at home too," Michael said with a smile. "The neighbors probably know her Mozart piece by heart at this point." The hours before the recital passed in a blur of activity. Dinner, showers, last-minute practicing, and finally dressing in their best clothes. Lily wore a blue dress that had been a gift from Mrs. Patel, with her curly hair pulled back by a matching ribbon. Michael wore the new suit he had finally been able to afford, thanks to his teaching position at the conservatory. The community music school where Lily took lessons was just a few blocks from their apartment. As they walked there hand in hand, Lily asked, "Are you nervous when you give concerts, Dad?" Michael considered the question. "Yes," he admitted. "Every time. But it's a good kind of nervous. It means I care about doing my best." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "I'm nervous too, but I'm going to pretend I'm just playing for you at home." "That's a good strategy," Michael said. "And remember, everyone in that audience is there because they want to see you succeed." The recital hall was buzzing with activity when they arrived, students practicing last minute in corners, parents adjusting bow ties and hair ribbons, teachers offering words of encouragement. Lily was scheduled to perform near the end of the program. One of the more advanced students in her age group, Michael, spotted Gregory Chen sitting near the back of the hall and went to join him while Lily went backstage with the other students. "Thank you for coming," Michael said as he took the seat beside the famous pianist. Chen nodded. "I promised I would. Besides, your daughter has considerable talent. It would be a shame not to nurture it." As the recital progressed, Michael found himself feeling more nervous for Lily than he had felt for any of his own recent performances. When her name was finally called, he sat up straighter, holding his breath as she walked onto the small stage. Lily approached the piano with confidence, adjusting the bench just as she had seen her father do countless times. She took a moment to compose herself, then began to play Mozart's Sonata in C major, a piece she had been working on for months. From the first notes, it was clear that Lily Collins was her father's daughter. She played with technical skill beyond her years, but also with a natural musicality that couldn't be taught. When she reached a particularly challenging passage, her brow furrowed in concentration, but her fingers never faltered. Michael watched with a father's pride, tears welling in his eyes. Beside him, Chen leaned forward, his attention fully captured by the small girl at the piano. As the piece drew to a close, Michael thought about the journey that had brought them here. The late nights cleaning the concert hall, the stolen moments at the grand piano, the chance encounter with Irene Bell, the audition that had changed everything. Each step had led to this moment, watching his daughter shine in her own right. When Lily played the final notes, the audience erupted in applause. She stood and gave a small, graceful bow, her eyes finding Michael's in the crowd. The smile they exchanged said everything words couldn't, about music and love and the dreams that connect one generation to the next. After the recital, as they walked home under a sky full of stars, Lily reached for her father's hand. "Dad," she said thoughtfully, "I'm glad you're not just cleaning the stage anymore." Michael squeezed her hand. "Me too, Pumpkin. Me too." But as he looked down at his daughter, Michael knew that even if he were still just polishing that stage, if the chance to perform again had never come, he would still be the luckiest man in the world. Because no matter where music took him, the most beautiful sound he would ever hear was the laughter of the little girl walking beside him, her blue ribbon catching the moonlight as they made their way home.